I hope everybody had a good weekend. It's actually snowing outside right now here in North Carolina, so winter is locked in for a little bit longer, it seems. Today, I'm going to talk about spaghetti waves and get into a little bit more detail. I've used it in some of the surf forecasts so far. So on to spaghetti waves. Again, this is our premier product. I think it can be useful. So I'm going to try to talk you all into some of those ideas now. To start, it all comes back to this idea that's been used frequently in recent years that's at the center of hurricane forecasting and tracking of hurricanes. This is just one example paper here that I have to illustrate the usage with hurricane forecasting. We've all seen these plots. When all the models are in agreement with the track, that gives us some idea of certainty in the track. When you get further out in time in the forecast and the spread between the model tracks grows, that gives us a sense of uncertainty in the track of the hurricane. You have the same thing with intensity of the hurricane, and this is kind of a mock of what spaghetti waves does with wave height here, but in this case, it's wind speed of the hurricane. So you can see the models are consistent in the strong winds for this particular storm, Ian. And if you see this, you're certain that there's going to be a strong storm, and you're fairly certain of the track of this storm even 5 days out. So that's at the heart of spaghetti waves. We are taking this idea from hurricane track forecasting and implementing it in routine surf forecasting for the surf community here at Surf Metrics. This is one example. I have several. This is just cool because it's Super Tubos, and that's the WSL event that's coming up in a few weeks. What does this show? It's very much like the hurricane track forecasts. We have a lot of lines, and simply whenever the lines are close together, there's very little difference here. So we go out in time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days, and the models are in tight agreement with the wave heights, with the forecasted wave heights. Very tight agreement. You look out 4 or 5 days, and there's almost no distinction between the models. So we're extremely sure of this first swell event. This next swell event looks certain, is probably the best word to put it. And even this next one, there's some signal here, but it's much less certain once we get out past 7 days. And when you go further out in time, you could see here out past 10 days, the models are all over the place. So in this case, we would discount the surf forecasts essentially beyond about 7 or 8 days in this period here, because there's just so much spread, it's not a reliable forecast. And you may get surf line that has one of these lines, and you look at it in the next day or in 6 hours, the forecast is completely different. This is why it is different. It's because we have entered into a regime where it's almost impossible to forecast the surf beyond 7 or 8 days. That's not always the case. I'll show some examples where that's not the case. So how are these ensembles generated? I'm not going to get into the exact methodology because I'm protecting that, but it's curated, and we have a lot more models that we can include, and this will only improve over time. We have as many as 120 different models that I plan to use in the product here upcoming in the next couple of months. So there's a lot more on this plot. I'm not going to get in. I've talked about the wind favorability and longshore current index. I'm going to skip that here. But below each spaghetti waves plot, there's a panel. You can click on this and it'll enlarge on the website. And it gives a lot of detail on everything that's in this plot. Essentially, this purple line here, which is actually tied to the wave period, it's a large wave period, large groundswell. This is the current best estimate model that we have in our ensemble. And you can see that it has these symbols, these triangles, and they're oriented. So you can actually see here that these are northwest swell coming into Portugal to give us the swell direction. The coloring here, which is not as distinct in Portugal because for the forecast period, it's a long period swell, about 15 seconds. So you don't see distinction here, but the coloring is the wave period. So we have both wave direction, wave period, and the surf height. So we have our key variables to know what's coming into the surf zone. The blue lines are our other forecasts that are used to kind of show spread or variability in the extended forecast. And those are the key things to kind of focus on with these plots. I'll just say real quick, the dots here, these are really old forecasts that are typically older than 2 days. So it's a little extra information on the plot, and it can be used for a number of ways to interpret what's going on, and I won't really get into those. This is a slide, so I can't do the interaction here, but on the website, when you put your mouse or your finger, in the case of a mobile device, over these triangles, you will get a mouse over, they call it, or a hover box that gives you the date, the surf size, and the period. And I will be adding the direction as well here with the wave height. Okay, to end, I just wanted to go back to the forecast last weekend. That was my first event to forecast. And I mentioned I'd be going down to Wrightsville Beach to surf. I did that about 4 o'clock. And I think the models were on target, and I can prove it with some work that we do. I thought this would be a great example of what is to come shortly. And some of these surf breaks have this. I'm only publishing it for one right now, but I can go back and look at these anytime. And what this is model evaluation. So the colors here, all the dots are different forecasts. This is the swell event of last weekend, Sunday, February 16th. And the red dots, the darkest red dots, are the observed wave height. So it did get up close to 6 foot, ended up being about 5.8 feet. And some of the models were a little bit higher. You see 6 feet, and some were a little bit lower. But what this plot does is it's verification. It's telling us that the model performed well. WBLiveSurf.com, all the surfers in the area know about this, so I'm not giving out any secrets here, but we can look at the forecast for February 16th, and chest to head high, occasionally bigger. This was just after noon, about the peak swell. It had dropped down to about 5 foot by the time I got there a little bit later, but you can see that the forecast several days out was right on target, and we had confidence in that using our spaghetti waves and our uncertainty analysis.